June 23rd, 2011. This is Mandy Pond. With me is Eric Hansen, Jason Schlechte. We've got Anna Picard, and we have Adam Hicks. And this is Jim Billingsley.
Yeah.
James Billingsley.
Yeah, Jim. Why don't you ask me questions? That'll help more than anything.
Excellent, I can do that. Well, why don't we start, where were you born and when?
I was born in Erie, Pennsylvania on November 6, 1923. And I lived there, went to high school there until I was 19 when I was drafted in the Army and served 2 years in the Pacific area. I was on 4 different islands. And really got into it.
And when were you discharged?
I was discharged January 12th, 1946. And I went back to work at a company before I went to war, Bliley Electric, that made crystals for radios. I went back there and worked till I went to college at DePauw University in 1947. Got a degree from there, and then I got my master's from Indiana State in Terre Haute. And then I got my first job in a town called Oberlin. I was there for 2 years, and then I moved to Saegertown, Pennsylvania, where I was there for 8 years. And this was really the start of my career. Little town of only had 900 people in it, but we had a nationally famous Saegertown band, played everywhere, played the All-Star game in Chicago. We played for 3 presidents, and on. And then I went to Oberlin, and I was there for 9 years and rebuilt their band there. And because of my reputation in both Oberlin and Saegertown, Dyke brought me here to take his job in 1967, but Oberlin wouldn't release me. And then after Hofstadter was here, for 2 or 3 years, he left and I came and I worked at Massillon for 11 years. And we did all kinds of things here. We did Macy's Day Parade in New York. I think we were in Washington, D.C. 3 different times. We did a 2-week tour of England in 1980. And that pretty much, and that's what all that stuff is there. It covers 11 years of what I was here.
What was your official title here?
I was a supervisor of music, of instrumental music. Unless you ask me questions, it's hard to tell you what I did, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. So as supervisor, were you in the schools every day?
Was I what?
Were you in the schools every day?
Every day was I in the, oh yeah. Yeah, I supervised all the instrumental music in the Massillon system. And I was the band director of the Tiger Swing Band for 11 years. And the concert bands and the whole shot, you know.
So what's the big difference between Tiger Swing and the concert bands?
The swing band was developed by George Bird. George Bird was a brilliant, his greatest talent was his arranging techniques. I mean, he could arrange anything. He's a wonderful trumpet player. And he built the modern, what we call them, the modern bands of today. He came here in 38. He was only here 8 years, but he developed the modern bands that they are today. In fact, when I first saw his band in 1939 up in Erie, I was 15 and I saw the Great Swing Band. That was his second year here. And this was the second to the last year that Paul Brown was here, and it just blew your mind. It was such a great band. And when I started developing my own bands, I developed a unique dance style that made my bands at Oberlin and Saegertown nationally famous. It was a dance style, and that's why I came here, because they figured I could do it here, which I guess we did a lot of, you know. It's hard to talk about yourself. You know, this is ridiculous, you know.
So what did the dance look like? Was it?
It was
What was your dance like?
my dance steps like. I didn't realize it at the time when I came out of college. I didn't, when I went to Saegertown, and my first band was in '54, when I did the '55 band, I didn't like what I was doing, so I developed my own style. My dance style is we can jitterbug, and we can do steps that no other band has ever done, ever, since I developed the style. You can't copy it. There's no way you can copy my style, because it's based on what I did, where I got my original ideas was not really me. I'm just an ordinary guy with ordinary talent. But I did a lot of reading, and I read about a great French ballet teacher. His name was Navarre. And in those days, they wrote ballet for the operas. And he was wondering what the heck he was doing with his ballet people, and it had nothing to do with the opera. So he decided that he was going to look at the score of the opera, and he was going to have his dancers imitate what was going on in the operas. Well, there was a German composer by the name of Gluck, and he was just an ordinary German composer, and he read his book, and he thought, well, gee whizzes, if he did it with dance, I think I'll do it with music. I will look at what the opera is saying, and I will write music to copy what the opera people do. Now, if you ever watch a cartoon, that's exactly what these cartoonists do. If you watch a cartoon, they copy the music perfectly. Well, when I read that, I said, this is what I'm going to do. Now, I got to tell you, I'm just an ordinary student, just an ordinary person. But I was a very good dancer in high school, so what I started doing is I would take something like, well, I can't do it now because I'm so old, but one of the first routines I wrote was sound off, okay? And the music goes ba-bum-ba-dee-ba-da, ba-dee-dee-bum-ba-ba. So I would march, ba-dee-ba-dee-ba-ba, ba-dee-dee-bum-ba-ba, you know, and I copied all the music with my steps. But they got very involved. They got very complicated. And the kids, you couldn't read music, you had to memorize it. And so the band, it just exploded. It just, people never saw a band dance. And one of the big things we did the Northeast, Parade, where they brought in all these great corps from Canada. And this was the first year I used this style. And I remember I went down, we made a left turn, and there was a park over there, and we had to stop because they were judging down there. And so I told my bass drummer, let's do this routine. Well, the people wouldn't let us go. Once they saw this, they couldn't believe what they saw. They never saw a band dance. This is ridiculous. So when we got down in front of the judges' stand, we did routines, and we took first over all those corps. Well, the publicity came back like you wouldn't believe. And the newspapers came out and started doing things. So that year, I got an invitation to go to Pittsburgh to do a band day. and they had about 25 bands there. And so each one of us could do about a 10-minute show. Well, not knowing the entertainment directors from the Pittsburgh Steelers saw the band, and after I finished my show, they said, we want you to do a show for the Pittsburgh, but we can't schedule you this week. Well, this went back to our little town, and nobody ever got an invitation to do a pro game. And then Paul Brown found about us, and we did a pro game for the Browns in '57, and it just took off like that. Eventually, we did the All-Star game in Chicago in 1959, and we got 11 minutes uninterrupted national TV. Uninterrupted. You couldn't do that today. Are you kidding? Do you know what 1 minute national TV would be? Well, see, this is what made the band, the little Saegertown band of 900 people in there, did the All-Star game. We played for President Nixon 3 times. We played for Eisenhower. We did all kinds of stuff like that. Well, because of my workload, and Eric knows this, my health has never been good, as you can see. And so the doctors told me that I couldn't. In fact, after we did the All-Star game, the next year, the people in Chicago said, we want you back in 1961. So we got an invitation to go back because of our performance there. This was unheard of, but it was the dance style that did this. And we had lights on our uniforms, you know, red, white, and blue lights, and it was just ridiculous. And the band had 90 people in it, in a little dinky school like this, you know. But after my health broke, I had to write them and tell them I couldn't come. And then one of my students, when the doctor said, you just got to knock it off, Jim. So one of my students was a student at Oberlin, and she found out there was an opening there. So she went to see the superintendent, and she said, why don't you do yourself a favor and hire this guy? So I got a call from them, and I went in. My eyes free. I went in for an interview, and I told them, I said, if you hire me, no, I don't want you to say anything about Saegertown. Because he said, we don't have much of a band here at all. It's just a nothing band. And I said, I don't want you to say anything what I did at Saegertown. So I went to Oberlin, and the first thing I noticed that I was working with very, very bright kids. It was a college town. I had kids in my band, 15 kids in my band, their parents had doctor's degrees. And I recognized how sharp they were, you know. So the first show we did there exploded the town. They never saw anything like this. In 1966, I took them to the All-Star game in Oberlin. Well, the band was so strong there, it put everybody else down. And there was a lot of jealousy and a lot of monkeying around. So when I came back from Chicago, they put the clamps on the band. You can only practice so long. You can only do so many shows and stuff like that. I think in 1967, we got an invitation to do the, what is it in England? The World Cup in Liverpool, England. All expenses paid by Coke and by Pepsi, but the school wouldn't let me do it. No way, no way, no way in the world can you do this. I would bring international fame to this town, and this was a famous town. Oberlin College is a very famous town. So they just put the clamps on it, and they wouldn't let me do much after that. And then I got an invitation to work at Massillon. But we didn't tell anybody at Massillon what I had done before. I just built my own. Well, you can read about it all there. Just look at the first book, you know. Eric saw my first show, and he can tell you that the band director before that, what happened there, Eric?
discipline.
And the band
Yeah.
just went down. But when I came in, the kids in Massillon never knew what I did. But when I was in the Army, I was a paratrooper in the Army, and I had 42 of my own men in combat. So don't monkey with me when it comes to discipline. Just don't. But the kids in Massillon realized I knew what I was doing, and it just turned it around, and it was a wonderful experience there. Kids in Massillon were wonderful. They really were. And all their tradition. I was here when Bob Cummings was here. So, okay, ask me some more questions.
Okay. Well, I know that
Is
you
this
brought,
going okay?
this is wonderful. You got to dance and sing.
It's,
I'm excited.
well, yeah. It's hard for me to hear. I'm so deaf. What do you want me to do?
Well, you were singing this for me. If you'd like to explain what that
Well,
that is.
See, George came here in 1938, and Paul Brown brought him here because Paul Brown was a person, and so was George, and eventually me. I didn't realize it at the time. We had vision. You can't get any place without vision. Like when I came here to Massillon, I wanted to build loges up over the stadium. Because when I went to all these pro games, we did every pro game you can imagine. Oh, they wouldn't do that. And I was here about 2 years, and I told my wife, I'm out of here. And I says, why is that? I said, they have no vision here. They're not going anyplace. Now you look at the last 40 years, you know what I'm talking about. If you're going to be great, you have to have vision. You can't do what you did before. You must move on. And that's what George brought here. Now he wrote this fanfare. It says George Bird, August 24th, 1938, his first year here. Well, he built the greatest band in the United States. And that's a long story about George. I knew George very well. I bet I have about that many letters. I think I brought a lot of that many letters from George.
Could you tell us George's story?
What?
Could you tell us George's story?
George's story, I don't know that much about, but Bob Wenzel wrote a whole thing about him. Don't you have a copy of that?
I think I might.
You got to read that. It talks all about George. It talks all about Dyke Ford. It talks about all the band directors are here. Now, since I left here, get this, since I left in 1980, they've had 7 directors. Vision is the secret. Like when I read about those great composers in Germany and that, and how they copied the music. That's how you write. You don't write what somebody else writes, you write what you want to write. So when I would give clinics and stuff like at the University of Akron, they said, Jim, we're not original like you. I said, you're insane. I'm no more original than anybody else. They said, how? Well, you certainly are. I said, I'm not. I said, have you heard of, who's the guy that had the dance band? What was his name?
Dick Clark.
Who?
Dick Clark.
Dick Clark. What did he do? He put a record on, right? The camera went to the floor. There were 20 couples out there, right? Show me 2 that are dancing the same. You can't? Because everybody has their own idea? That's being original. Well, why don't you apply it to your band? Well, because the chorus run everything. The chorus will pass. You must entertain. Your biggest job is to entertain. And what do they love the most? Dancing with the Stars. Come on. Vision. If you don't have vision, you're not going from here to there. And when I was a young kid, you know, when I took over that little dinky band in Saegertown, 900 people lived in the town. But it was vision that took it. But I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't realize I had this talent to write like that, just like George did. Does this bore you?
This is great.
Well, it's an amazing story. Should I tell them about the books? You tell them about the books. Well, when I was at Saegertown, because my health was so bad, you wouldn't believe how bad, you wouldn't believe if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. When I was at Saegertown, after I left, there was a doctor, Sam Harrison. He's a doctor of, he taught at the University of Allegheny. And he's a wonderful, wonderful man, and so he decided that he was going to write a history of Saegertown. So in his research, he came on this band that was there 50 years ago. And he said, what's this? What's this with this band? So he started to investigate it. And after he investigated, he said, my God, there's enough material here to buy a book, to write a book, which he did. And so last year, right around this time, we went back to Saegertown and they had this tremendous, he was there, this tremendous outpouring of the community where they opened up his book. I have a copy of it at home. You might even want it, I don't know. That was on the 26th of June. Had this wonderful thing, and they had, the band kids came back and they did dance routines and they did everything, and they just did everything. So after he wrote this book, which I have, he had many copies there, I have a student at Oberlin that always kept in touch with me. And she said, well, if they wrote a book about you at Saegertown, we're going to write a book about you at Oberlin, which they just completed. In fact, they're sending me a copy. It should be in the mail any day. And then I think next month we're going to Oberlin and they're going to have a big thing. Well, you wanted to know, I hope you're never going to show this thing. But I can't imagine, and we're talking about young guys like yourself. I don't know what you'll ever do. But I never dreamed, never in my whole life, that they would write books about me. And it all came from vision. Without vision, you can't do anything. Like I was just an ordinary college kid and just an ordinary band director and that until I learned from these masters of 1700s how they did it. Now, and then I wrote a book. It's about this thick. I could never get it published, but I think the people in Oberlin are going to do it. And in this book, I tell you everything how to do it. And if some young band director picks up this book and reads what I wrote about George, about everything, he can do it. But nobody's read it yet. It's about this thick, and it has everything like, if you want to know how to put your own field in, you can. And it shows you exactly how I did it. I mean, it's so simple. All you have to do is watch a cartoon. That's all you have to do is watch it. And say, I'm going to do that with my band. Can you imagine how entertaining this is? I mean, people would come to Saegertown, you couldn't get into town. You couldn't get in there. And the chief of police used to get so mad, he's like, why did and they come to see the band. But young people like yourself, you wonder what you can do. You'd be amazed what you can do. My brother and I lived when we were little kids, because my father was gone. We lived in one room for 9 years. One room for 9 years. My brother Hobie was a diving coach at the University of Indiana. They developed people like Mark Spitz, stuff like that, you know. He coached 6 Olympics. That's my brother. He's my younger brother. And I showed Eric a picture of my father today. And my father was very talented, extremely talented. And I think a lot of this came from my dad. But if you're going to do anything in your life, just listen to somebody like me. I'm just an ordinary guy. 2 books. In fact, later on, when I get the book, I'll come down and we'll show it to you.
Please do.
Now, what they have on the book, you got to hear this story. When Sam Harrison was writing the book, he didn't know how he was going to get it published. But he had a friend named Joe Zentis. And Joe Zentis has written 4 books. So he got in touch with him and he said, I'll publish your book, which he did. Well, then when Patty Price wrote the book at Oberlin, she didn't know how she was going to get it published. So I told her about Sam, and Sam told her about this, and so Sam or Joe published this book. And so my brother was so famous at the university, they named the building after him. He and, who was his big boss? I can't think, my brain don't work so good. And so he called me, and the university wants him to write a biography. So they have it because these 2 coaches, Councilman was this guy's name, Councilman Billingsley building. It's a great big building. So my brother, I say he wanted 4 copies of the book they wrote at Saegertown. And so he said, I was so impressed with the book that this guy wrote at Saegertown. Do you think he would write my biography? And so I wrote Sam, and he said, no, I'm not into this. And Sam's a great guy. He's not out for the big meat. He's not into that at all. No way. And so I got a hold of my brother, and I told him about Joe Zentis. So my brother had a serious back operation, and he's in Mexico for 6 months, recuperating because my brother does real well. So he got a hold of Joe, and Joe said, yeah, I'll write it for you. But he never heard from my brother again. I don't know what happened to my brother. He's the way he is. But it's quite a story about actually my brother and myself. We actually came from nothing. We were destitute. I mean, they used to bring us food in a basket and put it on the curb so that we could eat. We were that poor. You know? I don't know how my mother ever did it. Tough. And when my brother won his first championship when he was 15, he won the Pennsylvania State Championship in diving when he was 15 years old. So he became a very famous high school athlete, you know. But my mother said to me and the other kids, I hated the water. I'd never get in the water. In fact, I was swimming and I was doing pretty good. And one day I just decided I was going to quit the team. So I talked to my coach, Errol Smith, and he said, well, you just can't quit. You got to go up and talk to Jack Kamara, who's the athletic director. So I went up and see him. And he says, well, why are you quitting? He said, you're doing well. He said, you've taken a couple seconds and thirds, but you're just a young guy. He said, you stick with us, you're going to be good. Next year, they won a state championship. He said, what's the real reason you quit? He said, are you having a fight with the coach or you don't like somebody on the team? I said, no, I don't like cold water. Oh my God, he said, get the hell out of here. So I took off, and when I went down those steps, I went, that's the best decision you ever made. You know, oh, I was so happy I quit. But it's just the way it was. And my mother was an unbelievably strong person. And she told me, and the other kids used to say, well, how come you're not like your brother? You're your older brother. How come you don't swim like that? And I swear to you, my entire life, I have never been envious or jealous of what my brother did. I'm proud of him. But I'm not going to swim. That's all there is to it. So my mother taught me this. She said, Jimmy, Hobie has his talents. You have your talents. You follow the way you want in life, he'll follow his way. And that's I'm telling you young guys the same thing. We didn't have anything. I was born lived through the Depression. I was 6 years old in 1929 when the Depression hit. But if you want to amount to do something, do what you want to do. Here, you all have your own ideas. And I think I'm going to teach you something that I really learned. My father was not a very good father, but he was extremely talented. And my mother used to tell me what a no good clod he was. So I was in my 30s. I said, I think I'll decide this for myself. I hadn't ever seen my father. So I went to see him. And by this time he had built a great big motel. He built it all by himself in a house. He became very successful. And he couldn't believe it when I showed up. I was his oldest son.
Want to take a minute, Jim?
Then his second wife told me, she said, you don't know what this means to him. I'm going to teach you something here. In your whole life, don't ever hate anybody. Don't do that. Don't hate anybody. It's very emotional. And I became very close to my dad, but we didn't tell my mother. But I learned that. Eric and I have talked about this a lot. The worst thing you can ever do, ever, is hate somebody. Grudge. Don't grudge. Like with my own wife. My wife has a doctor's degree. She's a clinical psychologist. I never give my wife crap, ever. Never, because she's carrying the whole load. Because I got, let's see, it was in 203. In 203, I had a tile business after I quit the band business for 18 years. And I worked in places like Glenmore. They built these rich doctors, these beautiful marble bathrooms, you know. I could do stuff like that. I didn't know I could do that. I started my business in the back end of my wife's car. I ended up with 3 trucks, you know, just, you have talent. You would believe what you can do if you just try. So, what were we talking about?
I know, it was quite the journey.
Oh, I don't know what it is, but...
Talking about your brother and the book they were going to write about,
he
he
what?
went to Mexico and never called anybody.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know. I know if he writes that book, he'll get it written because Joel will do it. But I think the other thing that I have been very, very fortunate in my life, I'm going to tell you this story, and you'll just have to read into it. When I was in high school, I had enough credits to graduate. Is this too long?
No, you're fine. I'm just making sure you look good.
Yeah. When we were in high school, I had enough credits to graduate in February because I was such a good dancer, and we lived during the time of Glenn Miller and the Dorsey brothers and that, and we were big into dancing, you know, and the chicks. It was neat. It was really cool. But I was a very good dancer. And I knew it, you know, I could just do things. Well, who taught you to do it? Myself. I just, you know, So, when the war started in 41, the school that I went to had a great superintendent, Herman C. Gross. He's a wonderful superintendent. So he decided he would start a code class, so that they'd get a head start when we finally got drafted. So the very first day I'm in class, I thought, well, I can take anything I want. This sounds good. Well, I was a violin major, okay? and I did a lot of violin playing for the school. And when the choir would go on concert, I would go as their soloist. When they need a break, I would play. And this is the only way this guy knew me. His name was Jordan, and he ran a shop class, but they were very advanced. They built transmitters and stuff like that. He was really sharp, this guy. So he came and he looked down at me and he said, "Don't you have enough credits to graduate? These are some of the unusual things that happen in your life." And I said, "Yeah." And he said to me, "How would you like a job?" Well, I was shining shoes at the time in a parlor with a real good friend of mine who eventually was killed in the war. And he said, "You meet me after school." So we got in a car and we went up to the depot in Erie. And I said, "Well, what's this?" He said, "This is Bliley Electric, where they make frequency control crystals for the Army." So he took me into the office and he said, "You just sit here, don't say anything." So he went in there for about 15 minutes. I never signed anything or anything. Came out, he said, "You have a job." Now listen to this. This is really super. We went down, went through security, went to the thing. I bought my office. My number was 241. And we went down about 20 feet, made a right thing. And I'm looking at this thing, and here's this calibration. It's right next to research, and I was going to work in calibration. I don't know what he told this guy. And then I went to work there, and I made tank crystals, and I was there for about a year. And then I was one of the first guys drafted, but it was a wonderful job, and they started me out at 40 cents an hour. That's better than 15. So when I went home, my mother and I cried because I was making so much money and we didn't have this kind of money. So when I got overseas, there was this one sergeant, what the hell was his name? Marshall. And for some reason or another, he didn't like me. I think he thought I was a real jerk. But I knew he was a tech sergeant. I was just a lowly corporal. See, we went on this particular combat. We went in because we fought in New Guinea, in Leyte, and this was Luzon. We went in on the 31st of January. That's the day I broke my hip. And we went in, this was bad. We did a beach landing. You want to get into that. So on the 4th, this is one of these strange tales. On the 4th of February, he told me, he said, "I want you to go up. We're going to put you on the front lines." And we went up and I met this Lieutenant Joe Baker. And he said to me, in words I can't use, "What did you do to get this call this duty?" I said, "I don't know." So he and I went into combat. And in this particular combat, it changed my whole life. Because I didn't know what I had. You got to really get into it to find out what you have. So this one assignment we had, the Japanese took their aircraft guns off their ships and put them on a street and fired them right down at us. So my captain said to Joe Baker, now we'd been through all kind of stuff. I mean, you wouldn't believe what we had been through. And he said to us, "Nobody's been on the other side of the street. This is how bad it was." And he said, "We got to get these guns. You guys get them." So there were 4 of us. There was Lieutenant Hammond and Joe Baker, my lieutenant, me, and a kid named Sol, and we were carrying radios. We got up about 3 or 4 minutes. Damn, man, we just got hit like that. Boom, we're on the ground, rifle's gone, helmet's gone. And Joe got a 20 right through here, right through it, under his arm, went out his back. And my lieutenant said to me, "Get him the hell out of here before he dies." So I dragged him out, crying and everything. It's very emotional. Well, because of those actions and other actions, they saw fit to decorate me. And that decoration changed my whole life and changed my life with everybody I associated with after that, especially the officers. But you can do things you never dreamed you could do. Now, there were two things that happened I had no control over. I had no control over working at Massillon. Dyke set that up because he saw my bands when we were both, would do things together. We were both the guest bands and that. But look for these opportunities in your life. You never know when they're going to happen. And you never know when unfortunate things happen. Like in 2003, I was working in my tile business. I didn't feel good. So I thought because I've had 10 bypasses, and I've had 3 heart attacks, so I decided I better go to the hospital because I wasn't feeling well. So I went to the hospital, and this was on February the 10th. And I got out of the hospital on August the 9th. I was there 6 months. I got a staph infection in my spine. And because my wife is what she does, she said I was out of my mind actually when I have no recollection, it was really bad. It was a bad staph infection can kill you. And the doctor said at his age, he's 79, you'll never make it. There's no way he can make this. And she said, you wouldn't believe what a tough son of a bitch this guy is, And through her and through him, he always came to see me. Day after day, he would come and see me. I made it. Well, then, on the 31st of January, I fell off my porch and broke my hip. And you can see these things. So when I broke my hip, the doctors told me, because at that particular time I had 20 surgical operations. They said he can't be operated anymore. If he operated on one more time, he'll kill him. So they wouldn't operate, and I laid in misery for like over 20 days because this was broken and they wouldn't do anything. They said, we can't do anything because if we do, we'll kill him. So this young surgeon, here it comes again, stuck his head in the door, and he said, I just went through your x-rays. And he said, let me tell you something, Jim. He's got his head over there, and he said, let me tell you. He said, you're 87 years old. So why don't we go for it? If you die, what difference does it make? Do you feel that way? I said, no, I don't care. So I called Kathleen, and she said, go for it. And this surgeon said to me, I'm a very, very good surgeon. So they dragged me in there, stuck that thing on my head, and you see me today. I'm still recuperating. I think it'll take a year. 3 things that happened in my life I had nothing to do with. So the greatest thing that you can do as a teacher, and the kids at Oberlin knew that, is inspire people. I never had problems with discipline because it's the way I taught. The kids at Massillon used to say to me, can't we just get one weekend free? Because we went to show after show after show after show. See? And when I first started to introduce my style at Massillon, the kids would look at me like they were, their mom was out of my mind. And I said, well, I thought you were the great Massillon Tiger Swing Band. You can do this stuff. And the first show proved it, But those are 3 things that happened to me. Now, do you want me to sing this fanfare?
I would very much like you to sing that.
Okay, this is the Massillon Tiger Fanfare. Now, I can read music. Anybody can read it. But can you read it and sing it? That's another talent. It starts out, let's see what key it's in. It's in the key of, where did I find a flute? It's a key. It's in the key of B flat, and it sounds like this. You want to sing it with me? B, B, ba 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 ba, B, ba 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 ba, B. I'm too high. B, ba 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 ba, B, ba 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 ba, B. Good. B, ba 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 ba, B, ba 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 ba, B, ba 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 ba, E. And well, have you enjoyed this interview? Would you like to ask me any questions?
I have a couple
Like
of
I'm
you
deaf
guys.
as a bean, but if you get close, I can hear.
I want to know, how did you meet your wife?
Oh, I met my wife. Well, my marriage is a long story. You don't want to hear about that.
I can take music.
You don't want to hear about my marriages.
What's your favorite song?
My favorite song? Probably, if I had to name one song that sticks with me the most and is really my personality, is Charlie Chaplin's Smile. It's a great tune. He wrote that, Charlie Chaplin. And if you read about Charlie Chaplin, he started out like most of us. He was nothing. Just a guy, you know, and he had a talent. And see, nobody knows what their talents are. I mean, your mother can't tell you, your father, and a lot of times you don't even know. And like I didn't know. I didn't know I could write like that. That was the last thing in my mind when I started writing that. I think the first routine I wrote was the bunny hop. You know, it was the only thing I could, and so we started jumping up and down, you know, and we found out that you can actually run and play. You can run and play at the same time. But it was something and of course I had a lot of help too. I had a guy in Saegertown, his name was Pastor Claney. Pastor Claney is one of the greatest men I ever knew. And his home was for kids that their parents didn't want them. That's what Bethesda home is. They take care of kids that their parents don't want. And so some of his kids were in my band that I didn't know about. And so the first band I developed, it didn't have any majorettes. So he said to me, if you put majorettes in your band, there were 5, he said, I'll buy your uniforms for you. I said, fine. He said on top of that, he said, I have 3 buses that you can use at your disposal anytime you want, free of charge. Well, this gave me an advantage in a little school like this. And now in Pennsylvania, all the fire departments are volunteer, so they have parades like crazy. So the first parade I took Saegertown to was a Franklin parade. And we played Tiger Rag. We swung the instruments like that I learned from there. And it was on July 9th, I remember that. And we won $200 second prize. And it was the last time ever Saegertown took anything but first. Never did take anything but first. You couldn't beat the style. There's no way you could come. You know, once you saw the style, once the entertainment of the thing, you know. So I taught him the bunny hop. And I think the next thing I did, have you ever seen a waltz in a field? Are you kidding? Somebody do a waltz? We did waltzes.
With the instruments?
We did the Whiff and Poof song. I think I can even remember some of the steps. Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Dee, ba ba ba, Baby ba, 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 bee, ba, ba, bee, ba, ba, bee. We did a turnaround. Then we did ba, 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 bee, ba, ba, bee, big kicks. Ba, dee, bee. Well, you never saw that. No band does kicks like this, see, it just didn't. But it was just something I just figured it out. But it was pretty cool. Let's see if I can think of anything else. I can't really think of anything else about it. But my wife, the woman I'm married to now, is the best of women, the best of wives. She carries the whole load. She's been carrying it for 8 years. So the other thing that's been really interesting is this. I'm in, 4 museums. I'm in a museum in Saegertown. I'm in a museum at Saegertown. I'm in a museum here in Massillon. And I'm in a museum in New Orleans because of my war credentials. They came up and they interviewed me for 2.5 hours. And it's a memorial. I think I told you this. If I repeat myself, it's because I'm so old.
You took my mic off.
Is there anything else you'd like maybe to ask me? Can I think of anything, Eric?
Can I ask you a question?
What?
Can I ask you a question? You said when you were in the war, you won medals or decorations. What did you win?
The Silver Star and the Purple Heart.
Okay.
The Silver Star is the 3rd highest award you can win. The Congressional, the DSC, and the Silver. And that is that's a hard medal to win. But we went through some hard times, you know. And that Joe Baker, I went to see him. He was when I brought him back to the Jeep, he was terribly wounded. And he was in the Jeep, and I think he gave me a little hug. He said, "Great working with you." And during the war, I mean, we really got into some bad situations. And they would never let you approach the dead. Never. The officers, they'd court-martial you before you. They didn't want you to see your friends. They'd pick them up and throw them in trucks and stuff like this, you know. And after he got wounded and we got back into the situation and that, I would have the office, whatever happened to Joe Baker? They wouldn't tell you anything. Well, is he alive? Is he dead? We don't know anything. They wouldn't tell you. So in 1949, a good friend of mine and I went to Fort Campbell because they brought the division back from Japan, or was it Germany? I don't know. And so we were watching a parade, and I was watching this guy walk by. And there's a funny thing about people, you never forget how they walk. It's strange about that, if you ever want. And I'm looking at this captain that's the head of this group, and I talked to my friends, and I said, you know, that guy looks familiar to me. And I said, he's out of Sea Battery. And they said, well, why don't you take a hike down there and look? So I took a look, went into the CP room, and here's this guy reading the paper, and he always had a burr haircut. And I said to him, I don't imagine. It's very emotional. That you remember me. Put down the paper, whoo, he went into the colonel's office, I think, and he said, this is the guy I've been telling you about. He said, this is the guy that dragged my ass out when I got wounded. And I said, well, what happened to you? He said, I was in the hospital for 1.5 years, 18 months. And he took off his shirt and showed me the scars in his back. It missed his spine, but it raised hell. Tremendous scars in his back. So later on, I think it was about 91, I have pictures of this. I knew that he was at Fort Bragg. And my daughter lives in North Carolina, so we went down. Somehow or another, I got his address, and when I called him on the phone, he didn't recognize me, which really made me feel bad. But I said, I'm going to leave you a phone number. Later that night, he called me and he said, I apologize to you. He said, I do remember. And so I went down to see him. By this time, he was a full colonel and had a doctor's degree. And he treated me like you wouldn't believe. We drank Bloody Marys in the kitchen, and his wife, Kay, said, so you're the guy that pulled his butt out? I said, yeah, I'm the guy. So he took me to the officers club, and he showed me, I have pictures of all of this, you know. And he gave me medallions and all kinds of stuff. So pretty soon, it was in 1993, and I just had 5 more bypasses. I had 5 in 81 and 5 in 90. And I got this letter from his wife, and I knew something had happened. He had died. 93. But it's been an interesting life. It really has. But I'll tell you something, when I came back, I got wounded the next day. I got, a bunch of us got wounded, about 12 of us, and it was about, I think there were 10, and I can remember in my hole, I took a syringe of morphine and went in this guy's leg because he was suffering so much and he would relieve his pain. But I remember and looking at him and just going in his leg and squeezing this thing out. And let's see, I had something I wanted to tell you there. I can't remember what. Oh, after I got wounded the next day, I got wounded here. I got hit in the leg here, and I had 3 operations on it. It took a long time to heal. It took about, I was hit in February, and they were still operating on it in September. And I would go to these hospitals. They would make me, oh, I got to tell you this story. After a while, after I went back and I was working with Dr. Adelman, Dr. Adelman said, gee, I hear you won the Silver Star. And I remember saying to him, well, what the hell did I do? He said, well, you must have done something. You know, you don't win that for nothing. So the next day, I stayed that night in a hole. And it was that very night, my Captain Grant came up to me and he said, we're making the initial attack on Nichols Field, which is a big airport. And he said, I got a captain up there that doesn't know his butt from a hole in the ground. And he said, you have so much experience, can you go up there and kind of look after things? And he said, can you walk? I said, yeah, it's just here, I can walk. I had a huge bandage on the thing. So that was about the 9th of February. And he said, let's see, what did he, I was up there, and I think that they finally released me about a week later. Well, then in the meantime, this had infected because on the line there, you can't do something. So the doctor looked at it and he said, holy mackerel, what, you know, he said, you got, get in a Jeep, we got to send you to the hospital. This is an interesting story. So we get in a Jeep, we're driving down there, and we get to the hospital, and there goes the hospital off like that, but there was one of their chief surgeons there with his black bag. And the guy in the Jeep said, we've got a guy that was pretty badly wounded here. And he said, what the hell do you expect me to do? There goes the hospital. He said, well, you can look at it. So he said, anyway, so they stuck me up in a Jeep, and he took down my pants, and they looked at it, and he told me, holy Jesus. He said, this is going to have to be cored. They got a cord out because down there. And I said, well, how do you expect to do this? So he says to this guy, here, take this stick and stick it in your mouth. And he cored that thing.
Oh my
That's the way it was during the war. It was just, well,
I
they
have to
took it.
stop you.
Anyway, they cored that thing, and but then when I would go back to the hospitals, they would say, "You have to stay here." I said, "I can't stay here. No way." If you saw those hospitals, you know why. I couldn't stay. I said, "This is a Mickey Mouse thing. Guys lost their arms, their legs, chest wounds." And I said, no way. I can't stay, when I never did. I went to 2 or 3 hospitals, but I could never stay in them. And so when we got back in the States, they made an announcement. They said, "Anybody seriously wounded, step over here and we'll give you a pension." I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. The men we lost. I mean, you can believe the men we lost in Manila. Hundreds of men. And we lost a lot of men. There were battles that they fought up there they had no more business fighting in the mountain. I remember we fought for this one building, and there was no reason. We lost 100 dead. There was no reason to fight for that. Didn't do anything with it. But that's the fortunes of war, just like these kids coming back now, these kids over in Afghanistan, what they go through. But it's, I was telling Eric today, it's the saddest things I would see is the dead we'd have, and you'd see the wedding rings. Oh. Well, unless you have some other things you want. Do you want me to show you something that's in those things there?
Yeah, do you want me to bring them over to you?
Well, why are you taking all this stuff? Why are you taping all this? You're not going to show this, are you?
No, this is for people who want to hear your story. The 4 of us definitely wanted to hear it, and I want to make sure that if we ever want to go back and hear it, we can hear it. It's so much better to hear it from your lips than a piece of paper written down.
Well,
I got too
hoping
interested in
haven't
your
said too
story. I
much
could
to you,
keep
but,
writing.
Do you want me to bring the basket
Yeah,
over?
dude, I covered pretty much everything. I'll tell you the most amazing thing are the books. Never in my life, ever, did I ever dream. Just like when I went to war, I was no more interested in war than men and women. Had no idea what I was going to do. Had no idea what was going to be called to me to do.
All right, do you want it in front of you or beside you?
No, this is fine.
Good.
Let's see.
Okay.
These are, you'll have to go through a lot of this stuff. These are the many shows that I wrote. The original, all handwritten. These are the shows that we did. This one is A Salute to Elvis. This is the book that I taught the band from. And these are all shows. Somebody, maybe some young director would like to come in sometime and say, "I wonder what this guy did." Let's see if I can read one to you. I got one here. "1979, oh, that's the first year I was here, 1970. And what's this?
Now, is this going to be in some crazy shorthand of yours that we won't be
Oh,
able to
no,
read?
this is written, there's no shorthand.
Okay. You never know. Some people have their own systems.
Well, it has things like 16 counts diagonal. Now this is Tiger Rag. I remember I rewrote Tiger Rag. Then it has advanced 4-step lifts. You'd have to see what they look like. You know, that's one of my styles. And I wrote a lot of stuff in there. I've always kept good records, and I don't know why. I just do. Swinging on Parade. Like a corkscrew, a 90 to the left, step bend up slash. What's a step bend up slash? Well, that's one of my steps. I can do maybe a little bit of it. I can show you what it looks like, but you won't see this by bands. It's my health. It's just the way. A step bend up slash looks like this. It's step, and then you bend completely over this way, up, and then you lift this leg up this way and go backwards. It's a step. It's a step, bend, up, slash. That leg comes way up. Well, you don't see that. You'll never see that. And all my dance styles are full of this stuff. Like when we did Sweet Georgia Brown, we did jitterbug to it. Nobody jitterbugs. They don't know how to jitterbug. And you can't copy it. I mean, you can look at it, but you can't copy it. You can try, but see, they forget the most important thing. And nobody ever hears me when I say it. The music will always tell you what to do. You don't have to do anything. Nothing. Just listen to look at it. What's it telling you to do? Like I remember when I wrote, let's see, what did I write? I wish I could march. Love and Marriage. Love and Marriage kind of goes like, love and marriage, love and marriage. But it's very exaggerated. Where do you ever see steps like that? You just don't. Like at that first step, boom, ding, that bend like that. Nobody does stuff like that. And what I could do is when I would look at a piece of music, like when I wrote Sweet Georgia Brown, I bet it didn't take me 10 minutes. When I finished, I was sweating. I could see it, could see the whole thing. And that was one of our really big numbers. Because we used, first we used just a solo trumpet, then we used 4 trumpets, then we used 4 trumpets with a guy dancing out there, like they do today. But there's all that. Like if some young director comes here someday and says, I heard about this guy Billingsley, do you have any stuff on him? And you say, oh yeah, I got all kind of stuff on him. Like you take this book here, what's this one? To Mr. B, the 1970-71 beer, 1970, Year of the Tiger. But you see, what really makes it nice is like, that was just common. Somebody told me while I was here how many standing ovations we got. It was unbelievable. But the big thing to do when you have a high school band is entertain your fans. It has no other purpose. A lot of people don't agree with that. They just don't. But I said we just wanted to make sure they hear us. Jim Billingsley, new Tiger Swing band director, was acknowledging heavy applause after the opening concert section of the annual band tour. Oh, that was the concert band. Got a standing ovation for that. How about that deal? Tiger Band swings at Cuyahoga Falls in Buffalo. But the kids did all this stuff. This was really one of my favorite bands. This is a tremendous band. That's a 1970 band. That was the first one I had. That's a good band. I mean, they were a little bit unruly at first, but not after they started getting the applause. They recognized that It says here, for the first time in many years, the fans gave the Tiger Swing Band a standing ovation following its halftime show Friday night. Ironically, Billingsley had his back to the West Stands, preparing to conduct the alma mater, and was unaware of the fans' reaction until told by this reporter in the band room after that. But it was really cool. They got, here's a neat little thing. Can you see that? What will Billingsley do? But you see, what I was trying to explain to you is that when I started in Saegertown with nothing, I knew nothing. They had no band there. They didn't have one at Oberlin either. In fact, when I went to Oberlin, I said, what do you guys do? They said, we sit in the stands and play. 5 years later, they were in Chicago. But if you, it's just, it's really cool. That was a good band. Yeah, it was a very good band.
So what kinds of materials do you have then in this collection? You've got scrapbooks, your notes. Do you have photographs?
Photographs of what?
Do you have I don't know, you mentioned that you had photographs. I don't know, of the band or?
Yeah, this is number 10.
Okay.
Now this,
June 23rd, 2011, tape 2, Jim
let's see
Billingsley,
what this
Massillon
one
Museum.
is. This is number 16. There's a picture of me. You see that?
Nice.
Okay, you got it? Let's see what this is. See, I used to have all that hair and I got that staph infection, I lost it all. Oh, that's when we did the, remember that one? After I was here for a while, we developed what they call the big shows, like Disneyland and stuff. Look at that one, there's an aerial shot of it. Now this is full of all stuff like this. Picture of the band. There's more pictures of it, it's just full of stuff like this. This is when they did a roast for me. There's my wife right there. Yeah, it was pretty good. Thanks for the great times, Mr. B, you know. Well, this is all full of this stuff. Let me see if I can. There's one here that's nothing but England. Oh, here's this thing that's about George Bird. It's right here.
Yes, that was, we have a copy of that because that's part of an exhibit we did here,
Yeah,
I think. Sacred Turf.
yeah, there I am right there. Okay. Let's see what this is. Oh, this is when we were in Holland and, oh, it goes on. And there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff in here that you wouldn't. You got all kinds of letters. Your performance on television on Thanksgiving Day was great, you know. See the thing that, oh, this is really cool. This kid here is Dick Fink. Dick Fink is a world famous opera star. He performs at the New York Opera Company and all over the world. And they did a big thing on him. Where was that? It was a couple of years ago, 2 or 3. Where he was with the outstanding citizen from Massillon, and I went to that. And he's just a great kid. Yeah, a lot of stuff there. And these are these airplanes I built, you know. In fact, yesterday I was telling Eric, I build museum pieces in airplanes. And this one guy, his name is Haynes. Yeah, he has a printing company, and I think he lives in a $3 million house. It's on Perry. It's that house way down in a gully. And then during the Second World War, he flew B-24 bombers, and he flew out of Africa into Italy. And the first plane they lost was called the Mighty Mouse. It got shot up so bad they all had to jump out. And the next one he flew was called Satan's Gal. And he found out that I built these museum pieces. And he asked me, he said, do you think you could build me the bomber I flew in World War II? I said, well, I can sure try. No expenses. You know, whatever it costs, you do it. Well, this plane has a 90-inch wingspan on it, and a lot of it was scratch built. Scratch built means you use no plans. You just look at pictures and you figure it out. And I found out, we found the real landing gears for a B-24, a model. And so Mr. Haynes owns 70 antique cars. And he has Alzheimer's now, it's bad news, Jesus. And so I told him about it. I said, here are the plans for these things. He said, I'll have one of my machinists make them. So they made these, and the machinist told me they cost $900 a piece. Landing gears, two of them. It's a beautiful plane. If I knew you were here, I'd have brought you pictures of the thing. But so I build a lot of planes, and won a lot of prizes up in Cleveland. So I got all these planes downstairs, see? So my wife tells me, you got to get rid of all this stuff, because you can't build. I got one more plane I'm working on. It's a 1914 plane. No, but nobody has a 1914 plane. That's why I built it. Who has a 1914? But I found these plans in a book that was published in 1970. And all they do is give you the plans. You got to figure out how to build them. So yesterday, you won't believe this. I can't believe this. Some guy came into my shop and bought all my planes. He said, I'll take this one. I got a GB. I don't know if you've ever seen a GB. It's a beautiful little plane. Mine was about this big. It's scratch built. Everything on it is handmade. It's a beautiful thing. It was built in 1932. He bought that. He bought a P-38 that I built. He bought a P-26 that's built, but it's not covered. He bought let's see what else he bought. He bought a combat plane of mine. Couldn't believe it. And then when that plane I'm building, the one that's sitting on my desk, he said, I want that when it's finished. So everything is sold. And I sold all my instruments, and I got rid of all my stuff up there. So my wife is very proud of me. But everything is here that you could possibly ever want. Let's see what
I'm going to call down our registrar. She's got to have some paperwork for you to sign for all of that. I'm going to give her a call real quick.
See, this is when we were in New York for the Macy State Parade.
Christine, if you'd like to bring temporary receipt down and
Here, this is cool.
Jim's collection stuff.
This is a picture of George Bird and me. I knew George really
Do you mind
well.
touching base with Alex? There are two close.
We got along real well, we really did. In fact, he wrote, when we were trying to get into Chicago, because we did a number of Cleveland Browns, I said, do you mind writing a letter to the people? The guy's name is Smith, that's the head of the thing in Chicago. They don't do it anymore. I said, do you mind? In fact, I think I'll even bring you that letter. I said, do you mind writing a letter to the people in Chicago and tell them what you thought of my band? And I got this letter. And he said, I've been the band director for the Cleveland Browns for something like 7 years. He said, this is the best band that's ever performed here. So we didn't have any problem at all. George said that, I didn't. There's a picture of George. Can you see it?
On the left or the right? That one?
Why, this is terrible shooting on my mouth like I did.
Can you?
I hope it doesn't embarrass you because it does me.
Perfect.
Do you think you can use this stuff?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think this is wonderful.
Let's see, I've played for, the last president I played for was Carter. There's pictures in it someplace with the swing band. I played for Eisenhower. I played for Nixon 3 times. Let's see, I played for, what else did I play for?
On what occasion was it that you played for them?
What year?
Was it like their inaugural parade or for an event?
Well, when I would play for Nixon, you won't believe this. He would fly into Youngstown. And they said, would you like a band? He said, yeah, get that band from Pennsylvania. And I have pictures shaking hands with him. All these bands in Ohio, and he goes, this one. It was the same thing when we played for Carter. All those bands down there in clubs, they wanted Massillon to play it.
That's cool.
You see, the thing that's really unique about the band, it's the style that sold it. It's the way they did things. That's what made it so different, because nobody else could do it. And I never knew I could do it. But if you want anything, it's in here somewhere. Let's see. Where the hell is that? Oh, here it is.
The England binder. Excellent. Number 14. Take note.
I think it was really cool when I went there. There it is, the mayor of someplace. Maybe.
The
But
Mayor of England.
when we took it over there, I told my boss, I said, Board okay's trip to England, Ganger Band gets big send-off. I told my boss, I said, I can't take this band over to England. And we're flying over in 747. Get that at 747. And see, like the people would do things like this, $6,000 a get. After we came back, we did a show for them. I said, I can't. Oh, this is old. Those pictures in England. Oh, we did. Here I am in a plane of a C-47. I have my own private license, okay? In fact, I even own my own plane, but I had to sell it. Pretty cool, huh? And so the kids told the pilots that I had a pilot's license. They said, come on, there I am with the pilots. So you can see them. Those are the other places. And, but it's the whole thing is there, pictures of everything.
Jim, I wanted to introduce you. This is Christina Sabu. She's our registrar, and she's gonna kind of take a quick inventory so that you get something that says that we are we're looking through your items.
Well, let me tell you what's in here. Like you have, like all the shows I've written, you have a number of shows year by year. Exactly what I did, who we played, the whole thing. Now there's everything I ever did at Massillon in there. just about everything you could think. You'd have to go through it. It would take you days to go through the whole thing. But it was my wife's idea. This was down in my cellar, and it was lined up, and she said, "Why don't you donate this to the Massillon Museum?" That wasn't me, that was her.
Well, tell her thank you.
Well, I don't have anything. I have just a few things at home that I'll keep,
Oh, sure.
because
There are some pictures, yes.
there's pictures galore in there. I'm trying to think where the book it is. It's got George Band's.
Pictures, and you can say, I don't know if you want to say
These
miscellaneous
are
file
all-
folders. It's
these
a
are
full
all the
clothes
shows.
basket full.
Here, put this in over there.
All right.
I'm gonna see if I can. I don't know back in, I don't think I can find it.
It's mostly 1970s and 80s, Christina.
It'd be so great if, see, look at all these shows. That's all the shows. And this is a workbook.
Okay.
This book here are all the original manuscript of how I wrote the shows. It's when I was writing them. It's all there. That's how I did it. So I decided to donate it. Maybe somebody will look at it someday. I don't know.
These are mostly newspaper clippings, but there are photos inside. They're kind of together. Oh, and one original George Bird piece of music.
God damn. I wish I could find that picture of George Bird's van.
Well, luckily, I know that we have some archives relating to George Bird, and I believe we have some photos. We did have a Christmas card.
This is a big photo like this, and it's a 1940, I think of it, shows the band at the stadium.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was 64 pieces. But George was quite the guy. The thing that made me feel real bad is he wrote like you wouldn't believe. I mean, he wrote arrangements, like everything the band ever played, he wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And so up in room 205, they had all these arrangements of his. I got back this one summer, and the janitors got a hold of it and burned them all up. Well, I had something like that happen to me. Every letter I ever got during the war, I saved. My wife got mad at me and she burned them all up. Don't ever hate anybody. Don't do that. It's bad news, boy. Well, there's a lot of junk here.
I think there's a lot of good stuff. It might be old, but it doesn't make it junk. Wonderful. Jim, thank you so much for sharing this with us and speaking with us. Classy ladies.
Well, that first year of majorettes I had was something else, boy. Bob Cummings was real good to me. I mean, he was real good. I mean, I would need money for things. I'd go down and ask, but he was real good to me. Because we helped the team in that, and that was the year he won the state championship. What else do you want to ask me?
Do you need anything else from that? Jim, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Yay!